Psoriasis is an autoimmune condition. Many people get eczema and psoriasis mixed up. Although their symptoms are the same, they're very different in terms of their mechanism of action. In psoriasis, a dendritic cell in the dermis just decides that it's going to release a specific interleukin, interleukin 23. And then this interleukin activates a very particular type of T cell in a nearby lymph node. And this T cell does two things that it's not really supposed to be doing. It migrates to the dermis and it releases another interleukin, IL 17. IL 17 activates keratinocytes and programs them for apoptosis, to die. And so this premature cell death of the keratinocytes is what leads to the scales of psoriasis with the dead skin buildup. So now, here comes the positive feedback of psoriasis. That one little activated keratinocyte releases a cytokine that increases the activity of both the dendritic cells in the area and the T helper cell. So now the cells are, all three of them are signaling each other and provoking each other in this never-ending cycle. And what this causes is an elongation of the dermal papilla, or those finger-like projections of the dermis into the epidermis. It also increases the mitosis in the stem cells in the stratum basale, because as those activated keratinocytes die, the stem cells in the stratum basale try to replace it, and again, contributing to the thickening skin. Rheumatoid arthritis is also an autoimmune disease. It's tissue specific. In rheumatoid arthritis, there's some unknown trigger. We're not really sure, but there's some trigger that promotes inflammation in a synovial membrane that's lining a joint cavity. So leukocytes like neutrophils are attracted to the area, right? There's inflammation. I sense chemicals. And once there, those leukocytes are activated by a helper T cell that thinks there's a pathogen. So this helper T cell is like running around screaming the sky is falling. And it's activating macrophages and neutrophils, and it's making everybody secrete all of these cytokines when there's no pathogen. Unfortunately, the specific type of cytokines that are released, they make local fibroblasts secrete another substance that activates osteoclasts. Osteoclasts were the cells that were secreted enzymes that did osteolysis and ultimately break down joint cartilage, causing that deformation of the joints that we're familiar with rheumatoid arthritis. Celiac disease is also an autoimmune disease, and this one's a little bit more humorally regulated, which is why celiac disease can sometimes be considered an allergy. It is essentially a gluten allergy. As you can see in the picture here, the gluten provokes a whole bunch of responses that start out with one little helper T cell that's primed to be anti-gluten. So you already make that anti-gluten immunoglobulin. This one little helper T cell, though, it activates B cells, dendritic cells, and other helper cells. All of these release cytokines, recruiting more cells to the inappropriate response to this gluten allergen. The B cells differentiate into plasma cells, and they start making the gluten-opposed immunoglobulin. So this aspect of making immunoglobulins against gluten is really just an allergic response. So like genetically, that person should not be eating gluten. Their body doesn't want it. And this just makes me wonder if humans were ever meant to eat gluten. Cancer is most definitely an autoimmune disease. Cancers that result in tumors usually have their own little microenvironment, and that makes destruction particularly difficult, especially when our agents of destruction, our medications, motivate specific immune cells. There are two general types of chemotherapeutic drugs for tumors. One of these types motivates cells that will specifically kill the tumor itself, whereas other drugs motivate cells that suppress the tumor microenvironment. Those drugs also suppress any substances that the tumor might be secreting into circulation. Immune suppression chemotherapeutic drugs are also used for non-tumorous cancers like lymphomas, leukemias, and myelomas. These drugs are incredibly similar to many of the other immune suppressing drugs on the market. In fact, drugs such as rimtuximab can be used for myeloma as a first-line defense, but it also can be used very carefully for gut biota autoimmune diseases. Myeloma is a cancerous condition in which a plasma cell continues to pump out abnormal antibodies. Those antibodies can be of any of the 5 heavy chain types, M, A, D, G, or E, along with the secretion of the abnormal immunoglobulin, which we call an M protein. Myeloma plasma cells can also just start to secrete light chains, right? Those light chains, the kappa and lambda light chains that were in the immunoglobulins, they then accumulate in your plasma, causing horrendous symptoms associated with abnormally high blood viscosity. This usually manifests at first with visual disturbances, as blood can't perfuse into the tiny capillaries of the eye. One immunotherapy for myeloma brings together T cells and myeloma cells. It's a tri-specific antibody, and it's able to bind with a T cell and activate it to specifically kill the myeloma cell that's attached to the other arm of the immunoglobulin. I feel like this drug is saying, you two should meet.